Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to be looking at chapter 39 of the Quran.
Throngs.
Throngs. You know, we had a listener write in and specifically ask about this chapter, you know, in relation to the themes of faith and creation, and I guess also like accountability.
Yeah.
So I think those will be our sort of guiding themes as we, you know, go through this. What do you think?
Sounds good to me, yeah. That's a really powerful chapter.
Yeah.
It gets into, you know, sincere devotion to Allah, and then also like what happens when we kind of stray from that path.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because right from the start, you know, the first few verses 1 to 6, they really establish this image of Allah as the sole creator, right? But it's not just creation, it's like the precision and the artistry of it all.
Yeah, exactly. Like the verses, they paint this picture of Allah like wrapping. Yeah, wrapping the night around the day and the day around the night. Like it's almost like this, like a cosmic dance or something. Perfectly choreographed.
Yeah. That visual really stuck with me, you know, as I was kind of reading through it. It made me think about how even just like the simple act of day turning into night is like such a constant reminder of Allah's power. You know what I mean?
It's woven into the very fabric of the universe. And then you have like the creation of humans, you know, from a single person and finding their mates, the livestock in pairs.
It's almost like this like blueprint for balance, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it makes you wonder, like if we trace all humans back to a single origin, I mean, how does that connect to what we know about like, you know, genetics today and like shared ancestry and all that?
That's a fascinating point. I mean, the Quran was revealed centuries before modern science, and yet it contains insights that really resonate with our contemporary understanding of the world.
Totally. And speaking of incredible design, I mean, the chapter also talks about human development within the womb.
Yeah.
And it describes it as being in like triple darkness. It's such a powerful image.
Powerful image, yeah.
Like it really reminds us that even before we enter this world, we're like enveloped in Allah's care, you know?
Yeah, a testament to the miracle of life itself.
Totally. But then the chapter kind of takes this turn toward accountability, right? It starts talking about the consequences of not recognizing Allah's authority.
Right. And a key concept here is this idea of associating partners with Allah, which, you know, might not be familiar to everyone listening, but it basically means believing that something other than Allah has a share in his divine power.
Oh, okay.
So, for example, like relying on luck or attributing success just to like our own efforts without recognizing, you know, the role of Allah in all of it.
So it's about understanding that everything we have, every accomplishment, it ultimately comes from Allah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And, you know, Allah doesn't need our gratitude.
Okay.
But verses 7 or 8, they really emphasize that he expects it.
Okay.
Like he disapproves of ingratitude and associating partners with him because it just implies a lack of understanding of his absolute power and authority.
I'm curious, have you ever found yourself like achieving something and in that moment, like forgetting to thank Allah?
Oh, absolutely. I think we've all been there. It's so easy to just get caught up in the moment and forget, you know, where all our blessings come from, right?
For sure.
But, you know, this chapter serves as a powerful reminder to cultivate that sense of gratitude.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the consequences of forgetting, they're described pretty vividly, right? Like it talks about layers of fire, like above and beneath those who disbelieve.
The imagery is pretty intense. Definitely like a stark warning for sure.
Yeah.
But it's also important to remember that, you know, Allah is also merciful and forgiving.
Right. Yeah. And that brings up an interesting question because it seems like this chapter really emphasizes both Allah's power and his mercy. Like, how do you see those two aspects interacting?
That's a great question. And I think it gets to the heart of, you know, what this chapter's message is all about. It's about recognizing that, yes, Allah's power is absolute.
Yeah.
But it's also balanced by his infinite mercy.
So it's not about living in fear of punishment, but rather, you know, understanding that Allah's mercy is always available to those who sincerely seek it.
Precisely. And that leads us to, I think, another crucial theme that emerges in this chapter.
Yeah.
Which is the importance of guidance and submission.
Right. Like verses 9:14 and 17:18, they really get into this, you know, they're urging us to be among the first of those who submit. And what's fascinating to me is it's not just like a blind submission.
Right.
The chapter emphasizes, you know, listening to and following the best of the word, which suggests an intellectual engagement with the message.
Absolutely. It's not just about blindly following, it's about understanding.
Yeah, seeking that understanding.
Yeah, seeking understanding and knowledge, but then also putting that knowledge into action through submission.
So aligning our thoughts and our beliefs and our actions
Exactly.
with Allah's will.
It's about recognizing Allah's greatness and then responding to that recognition, with sincere devotion.
Okay, so we've got Allah as the creator, the consequences of ingratitude, and then this call to sincere submission. It feels like we're kind of building a foundation here.
We are.
Yeah.
And a crucial element of that foundation, I think, is the Quran itself, which this chapter describes as like a powerful source of guidance.
Right. Like verses 21, 23, and 27, 28, they really get into this. They talk about how the Quran uses these everyday examples like rain, plant life, to remind us of Allah.
Sometimes you see like a breathtaking sunset.
Yeah.
Or like a flower, perfectly formed flower, and you feel this sense of awe, right?
Yeah.
The Quran is saying that that's not just random beauty. That is like a reminder of Allah's power. It's built into like the very fabric of the world.
That's such a beautiful way to think about it. It's like those moments of awe are almost like a direct connection to the divine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is the chapter contrasts those who open their hearts to the message with those whose hearts remain hardened.
It's almost like the Quran acts as a mirror, reflecting our inner state back to us.
Exactly. So for some, the Quran's message, it resonates deeply, causing hearts to soften and drawing them closer to Allah. For others, it seems to have very little impact, leaving their hearts cold and unmoved.
It brings up a really interesting question, like why do you think some people seem to be more receptive to the message of the Quran than others?
That's a complex question, and I think there are many possible answers. It could be a person's upbringing, their life experiences, maybe even like their inherent disposition.
Right.
But ultimately, I think the Quran itself suggests that it's Allah who opens hearts to guidance.
So it's not just about like intellectual understanding or even willpower. It's about a deeper level of receptivity.
Exactly.
That's ultimately in Allah's hands. Yeah. And that idea of receptivity, it's beautifully captured in the description of the Quran itself.
Yes.
Right? Like it describes the Quran as being, consistent, paired, causing shivers and softening hearts. It's like this powerful force that can really move us on a profound level.
It's not just a book of rules. It's a living, breathing text that speaks to the human soul.
It feels like we've covered a lot of ground already, but I know there's still so much to explore in this chapter.
There is. And, I think the next section delves into some pretty weighty topics.
Okay.
Warnings, the possibility of redemption, and the day of judgment.
Oh, wow.
It can be intense,
Yeah.
but it's also deeply hopeful.
Okay, I'm ready.
Let's get into it. It's definitely a part of the chapter that can make you really stop and think about your own life,
It does, yeah. Like it really drives home this point that our time in this world is, it's finite and we will be held accountable for our actions.
Verses 24, 26, 30, 32, and then 53, 58, they really drive that point home. They talk about the inevitability of death and facing judgment.
And it's not even just about what we do, it's what we say too. Like it specifically mentions the punishment for, lying about Allah and denying the truth.
Right. It highlights the importance of honesty, both in our words and our actions.
Yeah.
And it kind of ties back to that earlier theme we were talking about, accountability.
Yeah.
We can't escape the consequences of our choices.
It's like that saying, you can fool some of the people all of the time and all of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all the time. Except in this case, it's more like you can't fool Allah.
Exactly, yeah. And that's where I think this idea of redemption comes in.
Okay.
Because, even though the warnings are serious, it's not all doom and gloom. The chapter doesn't leave us without hope.
Right. Because even though the warnings are serious, it's not all doom and gloom.
Exactly.
The chapter doesn't leave us without hope.
Absolutely. It emphasizes that Allah is incredibly merciful and forgiving,
Yeah.
Even if we've strayed from the path, even if we've made mistakes, there's always that opportunity to turn back to Him.
Verses 53 and 54 really stand out to me here. Can we go back to those for a sec?
Sure, yeah. Verse 53, It says, O my servants who have transgressed against themselves, do not despair of Allah's mercy, for Allah forgives all sins. He is indeed the forgiver, the clement.
It's like a direct message to anyone who's feeling lost or hopeless. No matter what you've done, Allah's mercy is greater.
Exactly. And then verse 54, it kind of continues that thought. It says, and turn to your Lord and submit to him before the retribution comes upon you. Then you will not be helped.
So it's not just about passively hoping for forgiveness. It's about taking action, turning back to Allah and actively changing our ways.
That's the key. Recognizing our mistakes, repenting sincerely, and then making that conscious effort to align our actions with our beliefs.
That makes me think about the concept of free will. We have this choice to follow the path that Allah has laid out for us, but we also have this freedom to choose differently.
And that's a really profound point. This chapter is really, I think, underscoring this idea that we are responsible for our actions. And, those choices have real consequences.
But the chapter also offers guidance, right? Yeah. It's not just about leaving us to figure it out on our own.
Yeah, it's like Allah is saying, I've given you the map, I've shown you the way, now it's up to you to follow it.
Which brings us back to, I think, the power of the Quran itself. It's not just a historical document. It's like a living guide for our lives.
Exactly, and it's accessible to everyone. You don't have to be a scholar to understand the basic message, Turn back to Allah, seek his forgiveness.
Yeah. We talk about the Day of Judgment as this looming event. I'm curious how you personally relate to that concept. Does it fill you with fear, or is there something else there for you?
Honestly, it's more of a concept that fills me with awe, I think, more so than fear. It reminds me that this life is a temporary journey and our ultimate destination is with Allah.
Yeah.
It's a powerful motivator, to make the most of this time we have.
Yeah.
And to strive for righteousness in everything we do.
That's a beautiful perspective, and I think it really speaks to the heart of what this chapter is trying to convey, that we have a choice to make. We can either live in fear of punishment, or we can embrace this opportunity for growth and redemption that Allah offers us.
And, that choice has eternal consequences.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought, but it's also incredibly empowering.
Yeah.
It means that we have agency, that our actions matter.
And that even the smallest act of kindness, the smallest step towards righteousness can have this ripple effect that extends far beyond ourselves.
Speaking of powerful images, one that really stuck with me is that description of disbelievers being driven to hell in throngs while the believers are led to paradise. It's such a stark contrast.
It's a vivid reminder of the different paths we can choose and the ultimate destination of each.
It's like a fork in the road. One path leads to darkness and despair. The other leads to light and eternal bliss.
And the choice is ours to make.
It's interesting because we often think of paradise as this far off reward that we'll receive after we die. But I think what this chapter is suggesting is that paradise is something we can experience in this life as well.
Absolutely. Like that inner peace, that sense of connection with Allah, that feeling of contentment and gratitude. Those are all glimpses of paradise that we can cultivate in our hearts, like right now.
That's such a powerful reminder that paradise isn't just a place, it's a state of being.
Exactly. And it all comes back to that fundamental choice.
Yeah.
Do we choose to turn towards Allah, embrace his guidance, his mercy, or do we turn away and face the consequences of that choice?
And that choice is reflected in every aspect of our lives, from our thoughts and beliefs to our words and our actions.
It's about recognizing Allah's presence in every moment, in every breath we take.
I think this has been a really insightful deep dive so far. We've covered so much ground, from the creation of the universe to this importance of personal accountability and this possibility of redemption.
Yeah, it's a testament to the, I think, depth and richness of this chapter.
Yeah.
There's always something new to discover, another layer of meaning to unpack.
But for our listener, I think it's important to distill some key takeaways. What do you think are some of the most important points they should remember from this chapter?
Well, I think, this chapter really underscores, I guess, a few key ideas. First and foremost, Allah is the sole creator and sustainer of everything. And recognizing that should fill us with awe and gratitude.
Yeah, it's acknowledging the source of all our blessings.
Yeah.
Understanding that we don't achieve anything solely through our own efforts.
Exactly. And that ties into the second point, which is we are responsible for our choices. And those choices have eternal consequences. We can't escape accountability.
Right.
But we also have, this incredible gift of free will.
So it's about finding that balance between recognizing Allah's power, but also understanding that we have the freedom to choose our own path.
Exactly. And the third key point, I think, is that no matter how far we've strayed, Allah's mercy is always available to us. It's never too late to turn back, to repent, and to seek his forgiveness.
It's a message of hope and redemption that's like woven throughout the entire chapter, right?
Absolutely.
It reminds us that even in our, darkest moments, we're not alone.
And then finally, I think this chapter really highlights the power of the Quran as a guide for our lives. It's not just a book of stories or laws.
Yeah.
It's a living, breathing text that speaks to the human heart.
It's like a compass, to help us navigate these complexities of life and kind of, points us in the direction of truth and righteousness.
Exactly. And those who, open their hearts to its message, they will find guidance, solace, and a profound sense of purpose.
As we've been talking about all of this, one verse keeps coming back to me. It's verse 39, where Allah says, "O my people, work according to your ability, and so will I. Then you will know."
That's a powerful verse.
Yeah, it's almost like a challenge, right?
Yeah.
What does it mean for us to work according to our ability? Is it about striving for perfection, or is it something else?
I think it's about recognizing the unique gifts and talents that Allah has given us and using those to the best of our ability. Not comparing ourselves to others or striving for some unattainable standard.
Yeah. So it's about doing our best with what we've been given.
Exactly.
It's sincerity.
With sincerity and intention.
Yeah, and I think that's where the knowing comes in, where it says, then you will know.
It's that deep experiential knowledge that comes from living in alignment with our true nature, with our fitra, It's about tasting the sweetness of faith.
Yeah.
Experiencing that peace that comes from submission.
Yeah.
And witnessing the power of Allah's mercy, in our own lives.
It's like the difference between reading about honey and actually tasting its sweetness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that kind of knowing. It can't be forced.
Right.
You can't acquire it through intellectual study alone. It's a gift that comes from Allah.
It makes me think about, the story of Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him. He didn't just blindly accept what he was told. He questioned, he sought understanding, and he put his faith to the test.
And through that process, his faith was strengthened.
Yeah.
And he attained a level of certainty that very few have ever reached.
It's a reminder that true faith isn't passive. It's about actively engaging with our beliefs.
Yeah.
Asking tough questions, seeking a deeper understanding.
And trusting that Allah will guide us to the truth if we're sincere in our search.
Well, I think this deep dive into chapter 39, it's been incredibly insightful. We've explored so much. Creation, accountability, redemption, the power of the Quran, the importance of striving to live a life that's pleasing to Allah.
Yeah, it's a chapter that offers something for everyone, I think, regardless of where they are on their spiritual journey.
And for you listening, we hope this deep dive has sparked something within you, a desire to learn more, to connect more deeply with your faith, and to embrace that incredible potential that Allah has placed within you.
May this chapter continue to resonate in your heart and guide you towards a life filled with purpose, meaning, and closeness to your Creator.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. Until next time, may peace and blessings be upon you.